and thank you very much for coming to our HMS Saucy event. As you know, HMS Saucy was very, very important to Brixham, and it's there in all our hearts, and we wanted to do this event today because it's the 85th anniversary of the sinking of the ship and the loss of 18 Brixham souls. I won't say much more because Alistair's prepared a fabulous speech for us, and he's going to give a talk all about HMS Saucy and the impact it had on Brixham. So I'm going to hand you over to Alistair, and if I could ask you in the background if you could keep the noise down, because we're going to be videoing this for social media because so many people wanted to come today but were unable, so we're going to be videoing it. After Alistair has finished, we will be asking you any family members that can get up and want to talk about the anecdotes or any of their family folklore relating to the descendants, then we would love to hear it. So please feel free to come and talk and give us the benefit of your knowledge. Or just let these folks go, and then I'll hand you over to Alistair.
Ironic, isn't it? Because our parents never spoke
Talk about now as a shame.
yeah.
Quite often, okay.
Yeah, and now they're gone. Well, I don't know.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
We're about to stop. I'm feeling quite unwell.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You may be wondering why I'm here to undertake this presentation about HMS Saucy, especially as I thought I was coming to sing Drunken Sailor. Well, I have to be honest and say I don't really know, but some of you will know that my wife is one of the crew here, and with Bob, so perhaps I don't need to say any more. Well, in all seriousness, it is a real honour to be here to commemorate the HMS Saucy and her tragic loss. And most of all, the brave men of Brixham who sailed with her and never came home. Historically, Brixham has played a huge part in the history of the Navy in years gone by. Prior to the building of the breakwater in Plymouth Sound, Tor Bay historically served as a vital and safe anchorage for the Royal Navy and the Home Fleet. This was particularly so during the Napoleonic years due to its natural shelter from westerly winds and deep water facilities, which were crucial for blockading French ports. The bay provided shelter for deep water anchorage, safe water and supplies from nearby Brixham, and was protected by coastal defences built to counter invasion threats. To this day, Oxon Cove still carries the name of the victualling that once took place there, and evidence of the freshwater reservoir has been found under the site of the present town hall. In World War I, the breakwater here in Brixham was completed in 1916. This was at a time when much needed manpower at the height of the Somme offensives drew manpower away from the front to enable its completion. Up until the coming of the railway in 1868, the port of Brixham had no real significance. From that date onwards, this changed, as fish could be transported out of the town easily and quickly. With this in mind, one now begins to understand how Brixham men were tied to the sea in so many ways, and would be valued for their maritime skills in times of war. When war came, the Admiralty knew exactly where to look for skilled men. They looked here. Tugs have played a vital role in both World Wars, and particularly in the dark days of World War II, when we were at home, were in desperate need of the vital supplies being brought over the Atlantic in the convoys of merchant ships. These rescue tugs were far from being glamorous. They were not grand ships, but they were lifelines. In wartime, when merchant ships or warships were crippled by attack, it was the rescue tug that went out in foul weather, often under fire, to save them. Most were manned by Her Majesty's rescue tugs of the Royal Navy, a lot of these being experienced merchantmen and trawlermen. Some were manned by the Royal Navy itself, and some by merchant seamen, who flew the Red End Zone. By 1939, the rescue tug service had been reinstated following its disbandment at the end of World War I. Initially, the manning of these tugs was voluntary, with a nucleus of yachtsmen, fishermen, merchant seamen, and about a dozen masters with either towing or salvage experience. From this nucleus, the rest of the crews had to learn skills required for their new trade. And let's be honest, many were just boys, 15, 16, 17 years old, barely out of school, and yet they were thrown in at the deep end, and they learned fast. This was especially when new ships started rolling off the slipways and had to be crewed immediately. With some volunteers so young, the old sweats had their work cut out. It was a difficult and dangerous job, out in all weathers, and on many occasions coming under enemy fire. Many of these men lost their lives in the course of their service. In total, 20 tugs were lost during the war, either by enemy action or by capsizing in seas that they were never designed to cope with. The tugs worked not only in home waters, but wherever they were sent. Just imagine the sight of one of these tugs steaming into view. It must have cheered a sailor as his ship, disabled by enemy action, breakdown, or wallowing in the oceans, left him in the sea. To those sailors, they were angels of the sea. Admiralty figures show that 3 million tonnes of merchant shipping, plus their valuable cargoes, were saved by these rescue tugs. Also 254 Allied ships and countless lives. The Saucy was one of those tugs and was built and launched at Hessel Shipyard, Livingstone and Cooper in Scotland to an order from the Department of Transport and Shipping for the Royal Navy as a member of the Frisky class, and was launched in August 1918. She measured 579 gross registered tonnes and had a displacement of 700 tonnes. Typical for a tug, a large part of the weight was the huge triple expansion steam engine designed to pull larger ships in salvage operations. HMS Saucy was sister ship to HMS Frisky, the latter now being in Canada. In 1924, Saucy was sold into commercial service, acquired by the Shanghai Tug Lighter Company Limited, retaining the name Saucy and moving operations to the Far East. As war loomed in 1939, she was called back into the Royal Navy, returning from Shanghai to be based in Rosyth. There is no doubt that the original design of the vessel made her an obvious choice for use by the Navy once again, and she was requisitioned as a rescue tug to operate in British waters. With a crew of 31, she was crewed by merchant seamen, serving under officers of the Royal Navy Reserve, who were professional merchant naval officers who had joined the reserves to be called up in times of war, and most of them were Brixham men. They were fishermen. Now they were under the white ensign. In expectation of war, sea mines had been laid in many strategic locations to prevent attacks by enemy vessels. The Firth of Forth was one of the many river estuaries so equipped. These mines were generally connected together with horizontal cables, with occasional anchor points to the seabed. However, rough seas would regularly detach a mine from its group, and these became a major hazard to shipping. Ironically, therefore, minesweepers spent much of their time locating and disarming mines from their own country. Whilst many accounts, particularly contemporary, like to blame the enemy, accidents such as these were fairly common and were self-inflicted wounds when viewed on a national level. There is a natural inclination to blame this sort of accident on an enemy mine. However, this sort of mine was a defensive weapon, not a weapon of attack. The main minefield protecting the Forth lay east of Inverkeith, and it would be impossible for a German mine to float through this defensive line. It is therefore a certainty that the mine was a rogue British mine escaped from the main field in one of the preceding winter storms. This was a regular occurrence and was dealt with by local minesweepers. Based at Rosyth, Saucy was alongside on the night of the 3rd of September 1940, when the glow of a ship on fire appeared to the east. Lieutenant Patton, the commanding officer, immediately ordered steam, planning to go to the unknown vessel's aid as fast as possible. They steamed east at full speed and succeeded in reaching the vessel in distress, which turned out to be a Dutch merchant vessel, the MS Delfdijk of the Holland America Line, that had received serious damages from a German aircraft. It is believed that Saucy had put out the fire on the Dutch vessel fairly quickly, and by 1:40 a.m. had the Dutch boat in tow and began sailing back to Rosyth. At 10:30 a.m. the Dutch ship dropped anchor and Saucy headed back out on patrol in the early morning of the 4th. And tragedy. Later in the day, the rescue tug had lost communication. Alarms were raised as something was obviously wrong. The ship had come across a mine and had exploded violently without warning. She sank within minutes. 26 men were lost. There were just 6 survivors, with the loss of 26 crew members, of which 18 of them were from Brixham. These were not faceless names. These were neighbours, friends, brothers and fathers. Take the Harvey family. 3 from one family, all lost. Roy, aged 19, Cyril, 20, and their relative Leonard Turner Harvey. Or take Thomas Lovell, Tom, the oldest of all. He was in his 50s, a father figure to the young lads. He even lied about his age to serve. Such was his determination to do his duty, to defend his country and his town. Think of it. Boys barely out of their teens and men old enough to be their fathers. They stood shoulder to shoulder, going to sea knowing the risks. That is bravery. That is sacrifice. The loss tore through Brixham. 18 families shattered in a single moment, and many descendants are here today. Mrs. Margaret Madrick, widow of fireman Charles Roberts, remembered receiving the telegram. She said, "We were expecting them home on leave, so it was a terrible shock." 18 of the 26 crew lost were from Brixham. Only 7 bodies were recovered, 5 being from Brixham. And they lie today in Seafield Cemetery in North Edinburgh, which is a few miles south of the disaster site, whereas the rest remain with their ship in the waters of the Firth of Forth. At the time there was little coverage. Such losses were routine in those grim days. But here in Brixham, the grief was deep and lasting. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I read you the names. The men of HMS Saucy, 18 of them from Brixham, sons, brothers, fathers, and above all, fishermen first, and heroes forever. Fireman John William Clift, 40 Church Street, Brixham, aged 38. Sailor Thomas William Coysh, 10 Lights Road, Brixham, aged 41. Sailor Seymour William Crang, 3 St Peter's Terrace, Brixham, aged 29. Sailor William Herbert Cutt, Temperance Steps, aged 21. Sailor Sidney Foster, 24 Hillside, Brixham, aged 24. Fireman Stanley E. Gardner, 22 St Peter's Hill, Brixham, aged 26. Fireman Cyril John M. Harvey, 8 St Peter's Hill, Brixham, aged 20. Donkeyman Leonard Turner Harvey, 45 Shade Overgang, Brixham, aged 37. Fireman Roy Harold Harvey, 6 St Peter's Hill, Brixham, aged 19. Sailor Charles Harold Launder, 8 New Street, Plymouth, aged 36. Sailor Thomas Lovell, 17 King Street, Brixham, aged 53, the father figure. Sailor Vincent Medway, 25 Middle Street, Brixham, aged 39. Sailor Harry C. Nichols, 100 Lower Barton Avenue, age 30. Fireman Samuel Ronald John Piper, 1 Home Park Cottages, Goodrington, age 26. Third Engineer Officer Edward William Fulham, age 42. Fireman Charles Edward Roberts, 31 Prospect Road, Brixham, age 30. Fireman Alfred John Seward, 30 Garlick Ray, Brixham, age 35. And Fireman Ralph Edward G. Stamp, 30 Burton Street, Brixham, age 23. We remember them, we honour them, and we will never forget them. And today their names live on the memorial at Liverpool Pier Head, and here in Brixham on the wall of the old market house opposite the Golden Hind. It is a plaque that many of you will have walked past without noticing perhaps. But stop, read the names, and you will see this town's sacrifice etched in bronze. And here in the chart room we have something even more personal. This life ring, it is original to the period. It is painted canvas over cork, the same kind carried aboard HMS Saucy. This very ring belonged to the Harbour Defence Launch 1396. She later became the Pride of the Dart, known locally as the Western Lady. She saw active service at Dunkirk, ferrying men to safety under fire. Recently, she has been lovingly restored by local craftsmen. Every part from the rope work to the hand-painted lettering was done with care and pride. And today, she's not just an artefact, she is a living memorial. Family members and descendants of the Saucy's crew are invited to sign their names alongside her, adding their mark, connecting the present to the past. The life ring is more than wood, paint and rope. She carries stories, courage, survival, and remembrance. In the aftermath of this terrible tragedy, the Admiralty made a decision that changed the nature of its crewing of its vessels forever. In World War I, PALS battalions were created in the British Army, formed from men who enlisted together, often from the same town, workplace or social group. This approach, encouraged by figures like Lord Kitchener and Lord Derby, aimed to boost recruitment by allowing friends and acquaintances to serve together. While initially successful in attracting volunteers, the heavy casualties suffered by these units, particularly on the Battle of the Somme, highlighted the devastating impact of losing entire communities within one single unit. As a result, the concept of the PALS battalions was finally abandoned, ensuring that new recruits were spread across the army as a whole. The impact of the loss of HMS Saucy in its way had the same effect on the Royal Navy, and a hard lesson had been learnt once again. The wreck of HMS Saucy lies 15 metres deep, just over 1.5 miles off Inchkeep Island in the Firth of Forth, and was permanently marked by an orange buoy. In October 1945, the wreck was reduced by a controlled explosion to reduce the hazard to shipping, and the buoy was removed. By 1967, a survey revealed that the wreck was no longer perceptible, being lost in the silt. However, in 1992, it was found again by the mine hunter HMS Sandown, and her divers explored the wreck in 1993 and found her remarkably intact in 15 metres of water. This is a story that has its place in the history of the town of Brixham, and yet sadly it is not known by so many people who live in this fishing and maritime port. The bronze plaque dedicated to those heroic men is there for all to see down by the harbour, and yet for so many it goes unnoticed as they pass by. Thus, it is a story that had to be retold in honour of those brave men who died that day in 1940. In conclusion, I pay tribute to these men, but also to Bob Higginson, the owner of this fine establishment, who saw the need to start retelling this fascinating story. Ladies and gentlemen, HMS Saucy is gone, but her story and her men remain with us. They were brave fishermen first, but they became sailors of war. Boys and men of Brixham, brave, determined, willing to give all. 85 years have passed, but their presence is still here, in the plaque by the harbour, in the memories of their families, in the life ring lovingly restored and signed by their descendants. This is not just history, this is Brixham's story, our story. So today we remember them, we honour them, and we say their legacy of bravery and fortitude will never be forgotten.